All right, everyone, so let's talk about these riots that have been ongoing across the United Kingdom. You see videos of people destroying property, acting violent.
Get that shit done, Bush! Get fucked off, man! Watch yourself, watch yourself! Watch yourself! Get back! Get him out of here!
You will read articles about people, right-wing mobs, attacking people's shops, attacking police officers. Dozens of police officers have been injured by these rioters, and yet you have scores of people, tons and tons of people online talking about how these rioters are heroes and how they are amazing, they're wonderful patriots. And I'm just sitting here thinking, we have become drunk off of insanity, off of tribalism, off of nationalism, off of hatred, and we have become completely just sunk into this way of thinking that is just violently and dangerously reactionary. And it's just sickening to see. It's surreal, it's sickening to see, it's nightmarish, and you see so many people online justifying this violence. Now, if they saw non-white people rioting, then they would be saying, oh, look at these barbarians. But because the rioters are white, because they're Anglo-Saxon, they say, well, they must be rioting for a good reason. It's just selective outrage. It's a double standard. It's hypocrisy. It's lunacy. And it's only going to get worse. It's only going to get worse because this right-wing ideology, this way of thinking, whatever you want to call it, it has been brewing and germinating for decades now. You can go all the way back to the early 2000s. You can see it for yourself. It's been brewing, and it's been getting worse and worse and worse. It has not been getting better, everyone. It's been getting worse. It's not just the United Kingdom. It's been going on all throughout Europe. Western Europe, Northern Europe, Central Europe, you have been seeing this phenomena of right-wing extremism, nationalism, tribalism, and all these things. Now, there are reasons as to why this has been going on, and we will discuss the reasons why. I'm going to attempt to cover as much ground as I possibly can, and I'm going to be just thinking out loud and having a nice flow of thought here. And I really just want to discuss the root causes of this problem and why it's dangerous. So the main provocateur behind these riots has been Tommy Robinson. Tommy Robinson has been the main provocateur. He's been around for a long time. He goes all the way back to the early 2000s. He founded the EDL, or the English Defense League, back in 2009. The English Defense League was decentralized some time ago, so supposedly it doesn't really exist. But Tommy Robinson, he's still very active. And there is a testimony that you can read about from a guy by the name of Jim Dawson. Jim Dawson is another right-wing figurehead, and he knew Tommy Robinson. And he talked about how Tommy Robinson told him some years ago that his entire intention is to spark a racial war in the UK, in the United Kingdom. That has been his intention. So you have to keep that in mind. The goal is not just to... The goal really isn't justice here. If the goal was justice, then why the hell are you stealing? Why the hell are you looting? I mean, isn't that what conservatives were telling leftists who were defending rioting and defending looting? Isn't that what they were saying? Hey, how are you guys helping? Because the rioters were saying, oh, we want to help black people, right? We want to help African Americans. We want to help minorities, etc. And the conservatives were saying, guys, how are you helping black people? How are you helping minorities? You're actually destroying businesses owned by minorities. You're destroying neighborhoods in which minorities live. Like, how are you helping minorities? We should be asking these English rioters, these British rioters, the same question. How are you helping your people by rioting? You are not helping anyone. You're damaging your own country. And really, if you want to get to the to an ultimate consequence of this, or a seriously potential consequence of this all, what you're also doing is you are justifying censorship, further censorship on the internet. Because you already have this article that came out on the New York Times saying that it was disinformation that sparked the riots, that sparked these riots that are ongoing right now. And they're saying that these riots were organized online, they were organized on social media, they were organized on various platforms, and Tommy Robinson went onto Twitter/X, and he was spreading disinformation, and he was inciting people and provoking people. And so, by rioting, now you provide the argument to make further censorship online, to tighten the grip on freedom of speech on the internet, because they're going to say, well, we have to put more censorship, we have to restrict freedom of speech even more, because if we don't, then people like Tommy Robinson are going to be spreading hatred and disinformation, so now we need more censorship. So you're further making the argument for more censorship. What sparked the outbreak of these riots was a mass murder. This guy, and I had to write his name down because I cannot remember this guy's name. This guy by the name of Axel Muganwa Rudakubana. He is a Rwandan guy who is the son of Rwandan immigrants. He was born in Wales, so nationally he's British, not ethnically, but nationally he's British, right? He's a British citizen. But after the murders happened, Tommy Robinson went on to X, and he posted this video of some British guy saying, well, they allowed this Syrian asylum seeker in, and he killed these 3 girls. And, well, it wasn't a Syrian asylum seeker. It was a guy who was born in Britain. So already they were spreading disinformation. Already disinformation was being spread. Well, it's these damn Syrians. Well, a Syrian guy didn't do this. So what happened? These rioters went in Belfast, in Northern Ireland, these rioters went into a shop, and they set the whole damn shop on fire, and they burned it to ashes. Why? Because the shop owner is Middle Eastern.
How long have you been in business here, sir?
3 years now.
And have you ever had any trouble before in this area?
Yes, we did. 3 times.
What does the future hold? Are you going to be able to reopen?
I don't know. You have to ask the police about that. When they stop all of that, then we will talk about it.
How?
All of that happened, and the police did nothing. I'm telling you the truth. What kind of police letting the people to burn everything down? I don't know where is the safety in that, but this is all rubbish.
How do you feel this morning?
How do I feel? I can't describe that. Empty mind. We couldn't even sleep. The word just like, I can't even describe what's happening, to be honest.
And I saw a video of the shop owner, who's clearly Middle Eastern. More than likely he's from Syria or Lebanon. He's definitely from the Middle East. And he's saying, these bastards, they burned my damn store to ashes. What the hell? And he said the cops didn't even do a damn thing. The cops didn't do anything. Well, of course the cops aren't going to do anything, because the cops don't want to be overpowered. Or there's some sort of a conspiracy at hand allowing this sort of thing to take place. I'm not sure. But what I know is that these rioters destroyed this man's business, and I saw I saw the video footage of the aftermath where you see the store clearly horrendously damaged by fire. And I took the time to read through the comments, and I was hoping, okay, am I going to see some humanity? Am I going to see some humanity? Or am I going to see just insanity? Oh God, please, please. I was hoping to see a modicum of compassion for this shop owner. Nope. I saw a whole lot of hatred. A whole lot of hatred. And I saw this one comment. This one really just got to me. I saw this one comment that said, "Where were you when they were grooming our girls?" This comment was referring to the nightmare of the sexual grooming gangs that were running amok in the UK some years ago. They were sexually grooming young girls to be prostitutes. These were pimps, and a lot of these pimps were South Asian. They were Pakistani, ethnic Pakistanis. And they were sexually grooming young girls. They were giving them alcohol, drugs, and then they were getting them to become prostitutes. These were pimps, right? They were pimping. They're scoundrels. They should be gotten rid of. They should be taken off the streets. I hate these scoundrels. And it caused a lot of anger in the United Kingdom, rightfully so. And the law enforcement was afraid to say, well, the perpetrators are Pakistani, because they were afraid that it would cause racism and all this stuff. And that got people even more angry, because they're saying, well, law enforcement is hiding the truth about who is behind these crimes, who were behind these terrible crimes. And so that's what this comment was referring to. This comment was saying, well, where were you when they were grooming our girls? This guy's not even Pakistani. The shop owner is not Pakistani. He's a Semite. He's just a shop owner. What the hell did he have to do with what happened years ago? It's just absolutely crazy. This is like a mob burning down a whole shop because the shop owner is Middle Eastern, and then saying, well, where were you on 9/11? I mean, this is the kind of thing that we're dealing with here. This is the kind of mentality that we're dealing with here. Completely vacuous of reason. And that's another thing that I've noticed. So many people have lost their will to be reasonable. They don't want to be reasonable. They want blood. They want violence. A lot of people have reduced themselves to this way of thinking. And we saw this with the BLM riots, with the George Floyd riots. Why are you destroying people's businesses? Because the police bad. Well, what do police are bad? Well, police officers, without cops, America would be reduced to a war zone. We'd become South Africa, for crying out loud. What's your problem with cops? Why are you hating on cops for? But you can't reason with these people. And you see these rioters in the United Kingdom, and you can tell they're crazy. You can tell they're just bent on hatred. And that's the problem. The problem is, you see, you have a horrendous crime that has taken place. 3 little girls stabbed to death by this Rwandan guy. Okay, this guy was born in Wales, so technically he's a British citizen. He's not Middle Eastern, not Syrian, not even Muslim. This guy's not even Muslim. He wasn't raised Muslim. He was raised in a Christian household. And you have these right-wingers, and you have these commenters and people who do these videos on Twitter saying, well, we've been dealing with this for years. I mean, it happened in the Manchester bombing, and then we had the bombings back in 2005 or whatever, blah, blah, blah. Those bombings were done by Muslims. Those attacks were done by Muslims. This guy wasn't Muslim. The guy who stabbed the 3 little girls is not Muslim. He was raised Christian. So then they'll say, well, he wasn't white. And that's the problem. He wasn't white. He was born from an immigrant family. So no matter what you say, they're going to tell you that the problem is immigration, the problem is immigrants, the problem is non-whites. So really, the focus is not even really about Islam as much. I mean, they're still talking about Islam. But when you tell them that the perpetrator, the guy who stabbed to death these 3 little girls, was not Muslim, then they'll say, well, but he wasn't white. And that's the problem. So now when a crime is done, by someone who's not white, it's justification for a riot. That's just the bottom line. That's what this is going to come down to. That's what this has already come down to. If a non-white person does a crime, it's all eyes on whatever demographic that criminal is a part of. And that means that when you have major rioting happening, I'm talking pogroms, these people would kill the good and the bad. You're not white, you ain't right. And they will kill innocent people who aren't even criminals, who have no interest in criminality. They'll kill them. They want blood. And that's the problem here. So you idiots, because you guys are idiots. If you're justifying rioting and looting, you're morons. Right? You're evil, you're idiots, you're demented, you're all the above. You're a mob. You have the mindset of a mobster. The thing is that you guys are praising these people as heroes, these rioters. You're saying, oh, they're heroes. They're wonderful patriots. So your way of thinking says we should just allow this to go on. We should allow this to escalate. We should allow it to happen. When all you're doing is you're escalating the situation towards a major bloodbath. That's what you're doing. That is exactly what you're doing. And you're justifying looting and rioting. Well, hold on a second. You were saying that's what the left does, right? You guys were saying that's what the left does. The left does rioting. The left does looting. The left destroys property. But when right-wing rioters do this, it's totally fine now. It's totally okay. Yep, rioting is now okay. Rioting is now fine. Rioting is now justified. You can destroy people's businesses. And you read about how these rioters went into a business and they said, steal the beers, mate! And they were screaming the name Tommy Robinson? Because they're following this freak. And by the way, his real name is not Tommy Robinson. His real name is Stephen Yaxley Lennon. He tells everyone that his name is Tommy Robinson because he doesn't want people looking up his real name, mate, because if you do, mate, then you read about his criminal record, mate. You read about how he was a criminal, mate, because that's what you're following. You're following a thug. These are thugs. Just like you have Pakistani thugs and you have African thugs, you also have European thugs. And this is the thing that a lot of people don't think about. Dang it, they don't think about this, but this is the truth. And I'll die on this hill. I'll die on this hill. When left-wingers break out, they do a lot of rioting. I'll admit that. They're awful. They're terrible. They're scoundrels. I hate them. I don't like them. They're parasites, okay? They're evil. They go out, they riot, they loot, they destroy, all these things. Now, during the George Floyd riots, it was horrendous. Billions of dollars worth in property damage. They attacked people's property, attacked cars. They lit people's property on fire. They did terrible things. Awful. They burned down I remember they attacked a police department, a police building. They were attacking police property. Awful. Awful. But I didn't see any massacres done by the lefties. I didn't. Maybe there was a massacre that was done that I don't know about, but I didn't read about any massacres happening. When righties get mad, when rightists, right-wingers, when they get angry, they will do massacres. Anders Breivik in Norway, he butchered how many people? Over 70 people, around that number? That was just one guy. The Christchurch shooter in New Zealand, he went into a mosque and mowed down a whole bunch of people. That was one guy. When you have a right-wing rage exploding in multiple nations, societies, they're going to want massacres. Because a lot of right-wingers, they have this idea that they need to purge out the inferiors. right? A lot of them get into this IQ, race and IQ discussion, and they'll say, well, white people have higher IQs, dark people tend to have lower IQs, so they're parasites. And so in the law of survival of the fittest and in the law of Darwinian evolution, we got to get rid of these people or else they're going to ruin our nation or nations. That's basically what the Nazis taught. And so they'll get into massacres, killing, mass murder, that sort of thing. Now, the lefties, if they get their own Marxist utopia, yeah, they'll be murderous as well, don't get me wrong. But the righties, the problem is that righties love to act like they're so innocent. Well, that's what the left does. We don't do that. Conservatives don't do that. That's what liberals do. Liberals are the problem. Lefties are the problem. And when you actually take a look at what right-wingers have done and the things that they have said, they also do incitement. They also do provocation. And they also do horrendous violence. We've seen this before, and we're seeing this right now. Now, with that said, I will not sit here and say that all this rage and rioting and violence came from a vacuum. It did not come from a vacuum at all. It did not come from a vacuum. The problem, here's the issue. The problem is the left wing is unhinged. The liberals are unhinged. And there's no one really there to put the brakes on them. The left wing will come out and say, no borders, bring in more asylum seekers, more migrants, bring in people from Africa, from Pakistan, India, South Asia, Bangladesh, bring them all in. And that's not right. That is not right. For example, you got a country like Ireland. I mean, Ireland's a very small country. A few million people live there. Why are you putting in so many people from Africa in that country? It's not going to work. It's not a good idea. It's not a good idea. Now, if you want to bring a small group of people from another country because that country is suffering through war, that's understandable. But this idea of just bringing in people from countries that aren't even war zones, they're just poor third world countries, just bringing in these people by the droves into countries like the UK or countries like Germany and all that, the Netherlands, Denmark, it's just a terrible idea. It's an awful idea. Well, why is it an awful idea? Well, look at what's happening. England, the United Kingdom, at one point in time was a country that wasn't known for having a high crime rate. And the UK wasn't known at one point for having a high crime rate. Now it's the knife violence capital of Europe. Sweden was not always known as a country having a high crime rate, right? At one point, it wasn't a country known for having a high crime rate. It was known as a very safe country. Now, Sweden is one of the most violent countries in Europe, if not the most violent country in Europe. Very, very high crime rate. Why? Because of people from different countries. People from different countries, from third world countries and all that. They come in. Not all of them are bad. A lot of them are there just for work. But the problem is the trash follows them. And you get a lot of problems. Instead of having a very strong vetting system, a very strict vetting system, and also, instead of being tough on crime, they're not tough on crime in these countries. So you have these immigrants who come in and they'll cause problems, and then they have, people have kids, and some of those, some members of that generation born in a particular European country will also cause problems. And it just incites people. It gets people angry. Well, these foreigners have brought the crime rate up. They have brought, or these people who are not a part of the native demographic, even though they're born here, they're bringing the crime rate up, or they're doing lots of crime, or a lot of members of their particular demographic are doing too much crime, and it's bringing the crime rate up. It's bringing the murder rate up. And that causes problems. Tons of problems. Too many damn problems. And so you have insiders and provocateurs like Tommy Robinson who come along and they say, well, mate, let's do some rioting. Hey, mate, let's start a race war. And so what eventually happens is you have a Hitler. And that's what eventually is going to happen in Europe. Eventually in Europe, you're going to have a Hitler. And people will look up to him as if he is the Messiah. Like he's the 12th Imam in Shia Islam. That's what's going to happen. And the reason why I say that they're going to see him as a messiah is because look at how so many people in the Western world look at a guy like Tommy Robinson, or they look at these rioters and they say these people are heroes. Even though they're committing violence, they're destroying people's property, they look up to these people as if they're heroes. So imagine if you have a Hitler who is an embodiment of all of this anger, all of this murderousness, all of this this desire, this will for violence. They're going to look up to this person like he's a hero. They're going to say, this man's a hero. He's going to save Europe. And he'll be like a Napoleon. He's really going to be a Hitler. And people will fall for it. Now, if I'm still alive, I will warn you guys about this. And I will say, don't follow this guy. I will tell my 5,000 subscribers, because by then maybe the number will be 5,000. Right now it's 3,800. Maybe by then it'll be 5,000. I'll tell my 5,000 subscribers that don't fall for it. And then I'll get a whole bunch of negative comments, people calling me a cuck, calling me a moron, whatever, or a traitor or something like that. But people will fall for that sort of person. And a lot of you guys listening will fall for this hero, will fall for this great leader. A lot of you guys will fall for this. Now, a lot of this anger is overlapping with anti-Jewish anger. Now, not all the people in this movement are anti-Semites. In fact, I would argue that a lot of people who are supporting Tommy Robinson, or they say that Tommy Robinson's a good guy, a lot of them are just hoodwinked. They're not necessarily even evil people. They're just deceived because they see, and this is why this is so dangerous. They see the violence done by Pakistanis or people who are of another race, and they'll say, man, this is a problem. And there is a problem. The grooming gangs phenomena, that nightmare, that was a big problem. The knife violence in the UK is a big-ass freaking problem. I'm not going to sit here like some lefty and say, oh, well, no, there's no problem at all. There is a problem, but you see, that's what makes this whole thing so dangerous. What makes it so dangerous is that it uses facts to justify its existence. It uses facts to justify rioting and violence. That's what they do. They'll say, well, look at all the knife violence. Look at all the rapes. Look at the grooming gangs. Look at the sex trafficking. Look at all these issues. Look at all these problems being done by foreigners and by people who are not Anglo-Saxon, by people who are not Anglo-Norman. And yeah, the average person looks around and says, damn, I don't even feel safe anymore. I don't even feel safe in my neighborhood. And what happens? They look for a hero. They look for a hero and they say, oh, this is my guy. This is my hero. I'm going to follow him. Because they're scared. And they're not scared at windmills. They're not fighting windmills. They're scared of a real problem. And so because they're scared of a real problem, that further justifies, or that further gives credence to the idea of racial violence and things like rioting. Say, well, we're gonna riot. Well, why? Why are you guys rioting? Because of this problem. But the problem doesn't exist, but it does exist. So the problem, it basically is used as fuel to the fire. And it's used as a pretext. And when a pretext is built on reality, that pretext is very dangerous. Now, if the pretext or if the justification for violence is built on a lie, well, people will eventually figure it out. They'll say, well, that this problem that you're speaking of doesn't exist. The problem is that the violence that these people are speaking of, or the crime rates increasing that these people speak of, is real. The rise in the crime rate is very real. And so that makes the justification for violence seem and appear even stronger because it is a real problem. Now, let's talk about the phenomena of anti-Jewish hatred. A lot of this overlaps with the phenomena of people hating Jews. People hating Jews, it's increasing. It's really amazing. It's increasing. It's like we're going back to the 1930s here. It really is. We're going back to history, and I've talked about this many times. But there has been a lot of talk, and you can go all the way back to 2014, 15. There has been a lot of talk about how the Jews or Jewish people are behind the migrant situation in Europe. There is a video that you can see of a Jewish woman saying that Jews are going to be instrumental behind making Europe more racially diverse and all this stuff. I forgot her name, but
I think there's a resurgence of anti-Semitism because at this point in time, Europe has not yet learned how to be multicultural. And I think we're going to be part of the throes of that transformation, which must take place. Europe is not going to be the monolithic societies that they once were in the last century. Jews are going to be at the center of that. It's a huge transformation for Europe to make. They are now going into a multicultural mode, and Jews will be resented because of our leading role. But without that leading role and without that transformation, Europe will not survive.
That video went viral because it was used as evidence to show that Jewish people are behind the migrant situation. Also, George Soros being in favor for mass migration. So people point to that and they'll say, look, George Soros is Jewish. He supports mass migration. The Jews are behind this. And you have people already saying this. You have people already saying that Israel is bombing Gaza and then the Jews are going to push for Europe to open its doors for Gazan migrants. You see what the Jews are doing? That's what these people are arguing. This problem is not going to end. I mean, there's going to be a pause, right? Eventually there's going to be a pause and people will clean up the mess. There's going to be the aftermath, the destructive aftermath, right? More than likely, that's what's going to happen. There's going to be a pause, more than likely. But the anger is still going to be there, and it's going to continue to build up. I've been hearing about racial anger for a very long time, and I've only seen it building up and getting worse. I've never seen it going down. So the trajectory is that this is only going to get worse. It's going to diversify itself. Now, what do I mean by that? Initially, the EDL was all about Muslims. The problem is Muslims. The problem is Islam. That's not going to be the case. And you're already seeing this happening because the guy who murdered those 3 little girls, Mr. Rudakubana, initially when the murders happened, there were people saying, oh, it was done by a Syrian guy, done by a Middle Easterner. Well, no, it was actually done by a ethnically African man who was born in Wales. So he's actually a British citizen. But he's not Anglo-Saxon, mate. That's the problem. He's not Anglo-Norman. No, he's not. You see, so now the focus is shifting from Muslims are the problem. You have Muslim grooming gangs to non-white people are the problem. And that's what makes this whole thing so dangerous, because these people will kill not only Muslims, but they're gonna kill people who aren't Muslim. They're gonna kill Muslim people who aren't criminals, who have nothing to do with terrorism. They're going to kill non-white people who are innocent people who have nothing to do with crime. And they're just going to kill the good and the bad. They don't care. The idea that the Jews are behind the problems in the West are only going to grow. And this thing's not going to stop. And you see it on X every day. New posts on the Jews being evil and the Jews being behind the problem, the immigration problems and all this stuff. There was even a Scandinavian woman that I saw some years ago, a Swedish woman. Her name is Ingrid Carlquist, I believe. Carlquist. And she said that when the Vikings awaken, and yes, she used the term Viking. When the Vikings awaken, she said they're going to say, okay, who do we get rid of? The Jews, the politicians, and the journalists.
I'm really, really worried that when the Vikings wake up, and if they see, okay, our country has been destroyed with Muslim mass immigration by these politicians, these journalists, and the Jews.
Right.
They will say, who must we get rid of? The politicians, the journalists, and the Jews.
Right.
And this is not just about race. This is ultimately about power. And there's a video that you can see of a guy, he's one of the rioters, and he says, guys, let's not attack innocent people, which you hear that, you say, okay, good, all right, there's some brakes being pressed. It's not full accelerationist. But he says, the problem is those people in that building over there. I'm guessing I'm assuming he was pointing to some sort of government building, and he said, the problem is the people in that building over there. So this is about revolution. They want revolution. They want a French revolution, a French-style revolution. That's what people want to do. They want to kill politicians, and they want to take power. That's what these people want to do. And if these people ever were to take power, they would bring on a horrendous despotism, horrendous tyranny based on racial superiority. It reminds me of the movie Children of Men. If you want to get an idea of the future of Europe, watch the film Children of Men. Great movie, great film with Clyde Owen. And in the movie, England has just gone through a horrendous war. It doesn't really explain any details of that, but it just says that, there was a terrible war or some kind of terrible event, and then all these migrants move into England. And all the migrants and all the immigrants, they're all moved into this ghetto. They're all clustered into this ghetto somewhere in London. And then eventually, the British government says, let's just exterminate everyone in the ghetto. That's what these people want to do, more or less. And you see this anger in not just the UK, but you see it in Germany, you see it in the Netherlands, Central Europe, Eastern Europe. Eventually there's going to be a Hitler. There's going to be a European 12th Imam, European Messiah. And people will look up to him. People will look up to him. And like I said, anger against the Jews is rising up, and the Jews are being blamed for two things. There's other things, I'm sure, Black Rock, whatever, but for the most part, it's two things. Jews are being blamed for the migrant crisis, and they're being blamed for trying to drag the whole world into a world war. Because remember what happened. Netanyahu, he came to Congress not too long ago, and he said that Iran is dangerous and we have to do something about it and blah, blah, blah. And he wasn't saying, let's put boots on the ground, but he was essentially implying that we need to do a war with Iran. So people look at Israel and they say, Israel wants to spark a war with Iran. It wants to drag America into the conflict. If America gets into the conflict with Iran to defend Israel, that's going to bring potentially the whole Muslim world into the conflict, or much of the Muslim world into the conflict. Turkey could enter to the conflict, and then destabilization could spill over into Europe, and it would just escalate into a whole conflagration of violence. Israel wants to cause this, and it wants to pull the whole world into this mess. And so, eventually, I think what will happen is much of the world is going to say, Israel wants to drag the whole world into a world war. Let's just destroy Israel and get rid of the problem. And I think the idea of the Jewish question is going to rise up again. Because back in the day, back in the 1930s, there was this idea of the Jewish question. And the Jewish question revolved around this idea that Jews were not really assimilating into European society, and that Jews were spreading degeneracy, and they were spreading Marxism. And the Nazis came along and they said, we're going to find a solution to the Jewish question, or the Jewish problem, as they would refer to it. The Jewish, they refer to it effectively as that, the Jewish problem. And the Nazis basically said, there is this Leviathan called the Soviet Union, this monster called the Soviet Union. The Jews are behind the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union has killed millions of people. The Soviet Union wants to engulf the rest of Europe, and so we have to get rid of the Soviet Union. So the Nazis said that the Nazis pointed to a real problem, Marxism. They pointed to a real monster, the Soviet Union, and they used these realities to justify murder. When you point to reality to justify evil, that evil looks more and more tempting for a lot of people, and that's what makes it so dangerous. And so the Nazis said, look at who's behind Marxism. You see a lot of Jewish last names. Where there are Marxists, you have Jews. Where there is Marxism, you have Jews. So let's just get rid of the whole problem. And they began to do the Holocaust. Now, they didn't just automatically rise up and say, let's go kill the Jews. When Hitler first got elected, when he first became chancellor, he didn't say, let's kill the Jews. He didn't even begin killing the Jews at that point. That came years later. But there was, it wasn't really until the war between the Germans and the Soviets that you began to see talk about killing the Jews. And then when you had very high casualties on the German side, and the Germans were really in the deep of the fighting with the Soviet Union, that's when the Germans really began to kill the Jews. That's when they began to do the Holocaust. So what does this tell us? It tells us that because something happened in history, it can happen again. That's one thing. But another thing is that fascist tyrants, let's just say tyrants, because if I say fascist, then it's, it's definition of fascism. The Germans weren't Italian. Okay, we'll just say tyrants. Genocidal tyrants, when they first get into power, they don't begin to just commit genocide. That's not how it really works. They wait for a serious problem to erupt to justify doing mass murder. So they wait for some sort of a catastrophe to happen to justify doing mass murder. So when the Nazis first took power, they didn't say, okay, let's go massacre a bunch of Jews. No, they waited. They waited until the middle of the war with the Soviets. Then they begin to butcher. Because they said the Jews are the ones running the Soviet Union, let's get rid of the Jews. So even if you have a fascist take power in Europe, in Italy you have that Meloni woman, even if you have a fascist take power in Europe, if nothing is happening, they're not going to go out and commit genocide. There needs to be something horrendous to happen to justify it. And that's what I see for the future. That's what I see for the future. I see something horrendous happening that will get the world to say, let's commit genocide. That will get certain nations to say, let's commit genocide. Eventually there's going to be a Hitler in Europe, and something's going to happen that'll spur the Europeans to say genocide is good. And something will happen in the future that'll get much of the world to say, let's destroy Israel. Is it going to be Israel starting a war with Iran? It's going to happen some way. Even the Bible talks about this. In the book of Zechariah, it says only 1/3 of Israel will be alive. Only 1/3 of Israel will survive. Well, something horrendous is going to happen. The question is how or what events will lead up to that extermination of the Jews. And that's what I'm trying to ascertain. But those are my thoughts on this whole thing. The whole thing is a nightmare. It's only going to get worse. Don't fall for provocation. Don't follow thugs. And don't commit crimes like looting and all these things. And please don't sit there and think that looting is good and rioting is good. It's not going to lead to anything good. It's not going to lead to anything good. It's only going to get worse from here, guys. I really hate to say it, but it's a fact. And it's very sad to see. And it's really surreal to see how much people are just... how much people have drowned their own humanity into this sea of hatred, and how much people have just smogged their brains with this fog of hatred and brain rot, and just going online and reading, oh, it was a Syrian, oh, kill Syrians, and a lot of you guys are insane, and it really does show, and it's quite sad, I must say. Anyway, you guys just heard some theology. God bless.